time to invite Dave Haynes, who is in the investment team at Seed Camp, to share his insights on this. And together with him will be Vlad Andriescu, which is editor-in-chief at Startup.ro. So, guys, welcome to the stage.
Hey. Hello, Dave.
Hi.
So today we're talking about unicorns in Europe, which is kind of strange. So first of all, my first question is, should companies, when starting, focus on the issue of becoming a unicorn?
Yeah, so I think, just to get the kind of the elephant in the room and address it, I think unicorn, there's a kind of love-hate relationship with that word. It was much overused in 2015, so it's not a term that I like, and I've read a lot of other investors who kind of, say, don't use that word around me. Fred Wilson wrote, just don't use that word around me, it makes me sick. But I think it can sometimes be helpful to frame a discussion around, and just, I think there's a number of like good things about, positioning with unicorns, and there's a number of bad things. But just to get a sense of who's in the room, who in the room is a founder? Okay, keep your hands up if you want to build a billion-dollar company. Okay, that's good, that's good. It always worries me when I ask that question and all the hands go down, and it just kind of, it worries me a bit about the ambition level. So we, Seed Camp, we have actually one unicorn in the portfolio that's TransferWise. But I think I think the negatives of that unicorn term are that it's there's actually a lot of companies that aren't necessarily need to be big businesses, and I think sometimes it can put pressure on a business or a founder to become something that they're fundamentally not. But the reasons why it is important, I think it is, especially here in Europe, we need to think big. And what's great now is, you fast forward to 2016, I think at the last count, it was 48 unicorns in Europe. There's 20 now in the UK, and the rest are split between Berlin and Sweden and a few other geographies. And I think it's very helpful for us all to have those people to look up to. And, sometimes just placing a name on it can make it feel more real in the ecosystem. I think the other thing is, when you look at it from an investor's perspective, and this is something, my background had always been either as a founder or kind of in a kind of operator's seat, so I'd never really understood how venture worked, and we're seeing a lot of venture capital come into Europe, but it's seeking returns. So if you just think about the economics for a minute, Seed Camp has a 20 million euro fund. If we invest in a company, our starting point is 7% of the company. By the time more money comes in to make it a big company, we might be down to 2 or 3%. So even if they exit at 100 million, it still doesn't necessarily, you still need to do 10 of those before you can even return your money to the investors. So I think, everyone is hunting for those elusive unicorns, but there is a net positive result for founders, which I think if we do find them and we do fund them, then that means that more venture capital comes into the ecosystem here, just like it's flooded into the US in seek of returns.
Yeah, so you at Seed Camp, you name yourself your first round fund. So basically, you are one of the first funds that helps the startups working in Europe. So how do you think the market evolved here in Europe? Because we are usually looking at the US, now at China and Asia in general, but how the European market evolved in the last years?
Yeah, so we started in 2007, and we always had a remit to invest across Europe. So we've definitely seen a lot of changes. I think we now have 5 investments in Romania. So that's Ubervu, UiPath, Brainient, and I'm forgetting the others. Someone will remind me later on. And seen a couple of exits from that group as well. But I think what we've seen over that time, it has dramatically changed. So first of all, I think there is just, and this is a really good thing for everyone in the room, there is just a lot more capital out there. That used to be a really big problem. Even in London, there wasn't a healthy angel ecosystem. There was only 2 or 3 kind of go-to brand name funds that you could really go to, and they were investing kind of much higher tickets into business. And we've seen that completely change. I don't have the most recent data, but I think even just between 2013 to 2014 in the UK, we went from 680 million to like 1.8 billion. So in the course of that year, it was a sudden acceleration of money coming in. So that's been really good. But then I think we're also seeing this very interesting generational effect as well. So you have a lot of founders that have now been there and done that. So someone like Emmy at Brainient, he's now gone through the course of building a business, and he can recycle that either through making angel investments or seeing how a company was built. So yeah, recycling of angel money, but also operational expertise, which I think is still maybe lacking in Europe.
So when talking about the way of growing a startup, we're looking sometimes at the US model, at the Silicon Valley model, but I think, is there a European way of growing a startup? A model that should be particular to this area and the different countries?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to believe that there is. The one big thing at Seedcamp is we want to provide, as much kind of, the network, the capital, the learning to enable a founder to be able to stay here in Europe and actually kind of grow from a European base. And I think that is possible. I think the cliche has always been that it's, founders who are thinking too locally. They're building something for the Romanian market, or they're building something for the French market, and they're maybe not being ambitious enough or getting outside of their comfort zone. But I think that's slowly changing. You look at somewhere like Sweden, for example. I think it's a really good model to follow. They're in a small market, so by default, the founders have to think global from day one. Also in their culture, they have the legacy of like big companies growing even outside of tech. So I think there is a model where I think there is still big enough businesses, tech businesses, to be done in Europe. Those tend to be more kind of operational plays. We've seen a lot of those come out of people like Rocket in Berlin. But I think if you're building a truly disruptive company, you still need the US, or you still need Asia at some point. And therefore, what we try and do at Seedcamp is say, hey, stay in Europe. You might stay in Bucharest, or you might, send some people to London or go and fundraise there. But at some point, if you do want to, reach this unicorn status, it is going to be very useful to have, if you're not raising funds in the US, you probably want to go out and set up sales and marketing. So, I think that what we are seeing is this kind of, okay, you can still keep product or engineering in home markets. It's lower cost. Talent is maybe a bit more freely available, and you're not competing with a Google or a Facebook. But I think it is inevitable that if you're thinking really big, the US does still count. And we're seeing Asia coming into the fold a bit more, but I think it's still like focusing on bridging that gap between Europe and US.
So if we're talking about unicorns and this 1 billion mark, should the success be coined to this specific point, or should we change our mindset and maybe think about success in the startup world different, not trying to build to the 1 billion mark?
Yeah, I think that is a real challenge. It's a challenge for both investors and founders, and I know we're guilty of it as investors, where we're investing and you're not getting as much like feedback on a daily basis of how is the company going. So the only thing we as investors can set is the valuation at the next round, or maybe there's some other way of setting the valuation at that point. So it ends up being used as some kind of scorecard, and I think it's the same for a founder. You hear about your peers, and that there can be this obsession around valuation. There's actually a really great Fred Wilson post called "Valuation as a Scorecard," which is a really good read. But he makes a very good point. Like it's one data point, and it can be useful, and it can be a useful signal to when you're hiring, or to get press, or get big customers to believe in you. But ultimately, that measure of success is out of your control. If the market drops, if a competitor comes into play, there's a lot of external factors that you can't control. So I think as a founder, we need to get out of this mindset of just focusing on, I think sometimes the buzz around unicorn can be harmful in that respect.
I heard from the startups which went to the Seedcamp program that you ask harsh questions, and they should be very, very well prepared. So basically, what are you looking for in a startup when after you decided to call them to Seed Camp, what are the questions you look answers to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, it's funny that you've heard those comments. I think we are, we like to ask the hard questions, hopefully in a constructive way. And I know it can, investing across Europe, someone in London might come from a very different culture to someone in Lisbon or Bucharest or Tallinn. But yeah, I mean, I think when we're asking the questions, if it's ahead of investment, I mean, we're really kind of evaluating the team at that stage. So there's a lot of questions around that, a lot of questions around market. But yeah, I think it's usually not kind of one or two things. It's a number of different kind of data points. And to be frank, at the stage that we invest in, so we invest in a pre-seed before a product might have only been launched, or we invest at seed. So there's so many unknowns in the business. It's more about seeing how you answer the questions and how you come prepared for that, than necessarily that there is no right or wrong answers a lot of the time when it comes to the facts, the hard facts of the business.
But when talking about the technologies, should a startup look at the hypes of the moment? I mean, in 2016, we're talking about AI. We're talking beyond virtual reality, beyond AI, basically. So should a startup founder look to the trends and try to build something around them?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I think there is a lot of buzzwords at the moment. We've had this kind of era of social, we had this era of mobile, and now everyone's, there's new buzzwords cropping up, whether it's mixed reality or artificial intelligence or whatever it happens to be. I think ultimately the best founders, the ones who are going to build very big, who are going to found very big companies, they're probably looking at solving a problem first, and then understanding how a certain technology can help to solve that problem. I think the challenge is, and we see this quite often in, I think Romania is a place where you have very kind of strong engineering and technical expertise, and the trap there is sometimes for, if you're very strong in a particular field, like you've done a PhD in machine learning, or you've studied something around computer vision for a university project or something like that. I think the danger is kind of coming with this sort of, it's a solution looking for a problem. Which I know is a bit of a cliche, but we still see it time and time again. So I think the way we see it at C-Camp is we look on like two different vectors. So first of all, we look at a sector, and there's still a lot of sectors that are in need of disruption. And you look at what we're very strong at here in Europe or in London. So you have, a very established property market, very established legal industry. Finance has been, a huge area and a huge strength of certainly for Britain. So we kind of see how the kind of those sectors are being disrupted. So we had an initiative around legal tech. Now, if you look at that, we've got one company using blockchain to do smart contracts. We've got one company using AI to kind of intelligently understand the data that the lawyers are working with. So I think it's if you come the other way around, it can be a bit dangerous.
I wanted to ask questions about what are the technologies you're looking for now, but you mentioned also sectors, which is, I think, very important because you have two vertical sectors and technologies, which is like the solution and the problem.
Yeah, and I think there's still a lot of technologies that we are excited about. I think as the startup market and the technology market gets more mature, I think people are having to kind of wander out a bit closer to the edges. So we're maybe doing a few things that traditionally we hadn't. So we're seeing a little bit more kind of digital health, which we hadn't previously done. We've just recently made a couple of investments in the VR and AR space, which are very speculative at this point because not many people even have a headset at this point. But I don't know. I think there is some really exciting things happening.
So I think that there are many types of startups. When you first meet them, I think about the startups which are very impressive at pitching, but they don't have the technology or the market. Startups which are not very good at pitching, but they have something there. So from your experience and your meetings with the startups, which was maybe the most impressive startup in the first meeting and the least impressive, but which had success later?
Yeah, I mean, just to address the point on kind of pitching, I think that is one skill Especially, I think Europe as a whole is getting better, but there's certain markets that are still very bad at this essential skill of storytelling. And it's storytelling for investing, it's storytelling for hiring, and we're just not, we twice a year we take our companies to the US, and we put them in front of investors who see so many pitches, and it's disappointing because often we get the feedback of, wow, the products are as good as any built in Silicon Valley, but unless you can sell this, somebody with a poorer product is gonna out execute or out kind of story tell you. But to answer your question directly, so I think the best that I saw recently was we invested in a company called The Wave VR, which is one of our first VR investments, and the first pitch was literally done in virtual reality, and I think it's still novel enough that even just kind of putting on the headset and having that experience is a kind of a wow moment. But when you have a kind of a founder to back it up, it's kind of it's a double whammy. But we'll see how that goes. That's still quite speculative. And then I think to the latter point, a company that's maybe been surprising. Actually, I'd call out UiPath. It's a company here in Bucharest, and they're doing. The problem that they're solving is actually, it's not a very sexy problem. They're kind of increasing automation in kind of big businesses. And, it's not going to set anyone alight. You're not going to have all the journalists kind of, beating a path to Daniel's door. But, this is a very valid point where they're solving a big problem, and it's one that companies are feeling, so they're applying their method and they're unlocking a lot of value. And every time I see their numbers come through, it's like, yeah, maybe this could be the first unicorn out of Bucharest.
Dave, I think it's time to take some questions from the audience. If you have some, we have just a little time. Raise your hand.
Audiences are always shy across. If this was a US room, everyone would be, me first.
Yeah. There.
Hi. So this seems to be a recurring theme when discussing about Romanian startups. A lot of people mention, oh, this startup it's handling a non-sexy theme, but it's doing just fine. And there seems to be an ability for us to handle unsexy themes here in Romania. I ask people about fintech, banking, insurance, not that sexy, UiPath, you just mentioned, probably not the sexiest thing in the world. So what other unsexy domains do you see where we'll probably speculate on your answer and build something on that.
First of all, to address the point, I've only been here for a few hours, but I've already seen probably 4 companies that are doing really exciting things that definitely don't fit into the unsexy category. There was Lampix that was doing something very magical with their technology. There was Holosea that's trying to stream holograms. So yeah, I don't think it needs to be unsexy, but I think the ones that maybe are more unsexy. I think there's a lot of stuff on the kind of dev tools side of things, as that whole kind of landscape and all the architectures and changing. All of a sudden, there's kind of new things that you can do and new problems that need to be solved just because of the amount of data and all the different arrays of servers and things like that. It's not my area of expertise personally, but I think there's still a lot to do in that space. And then I think it's applying these kind of technology facilitators to very established industries. So we invested in a company two companies that we invested in Serbia. One is building SaaS for the trucking industry, and the other one is building SaaS for the construction industry. So it's areas where the founders had deep kind of family ties to those industries. They could see this wave of new technology and were like, aha, right, this is still an industry that needs unlocking. And I'm always surprised just when I think, oh, innovation is running out, or I kind of see another pitch and I'm like, oh, that's another Me Too product. I think it's like you go through these kind of waves where it's like, oh no, I've seen everything, and then all of a sudden something will pop up and you're like, wow, okay, yeah, that solves a big problem. Could be a very big billion-dollar company.
Hi, I'm Dragoș from Hypo. Oh, sorry. You mentioned about operations in Europe that might be a lack of skills or knowledge or know-how here. Can you dig a bit deeper into that, and what do you see different in Europe comparing to States?
Yeah, so in terms of operational expertise, I think, it would be hard to say anything specific without it sounding a bit cliched. I do think, there are just so many companies now in the US that have, they're almost on their kind of third or fourth generation of companies coming out of the valley. So, if you've been a Facebook engineer and you've seen the challenge of scaling from, 1 million users to 100 million users, that just gives you a whole different perspective in terms of the tech challenges, how you organize a team, how you run interviews, like how you do staff appraisals. There's so many kind of like soft things around that. I think there's also an ambition level. Like once you've been in a company, I think we're now seeing employees spin out of people like Spotify and King and people like that, and they come out of those experiences and they bring a lot of just general expertise, but also a confidence of like, right, I know that this can be done, which I think is very, very useful.
Thank you, Dave. If you need to talk more to Dave, I think you can find him in the hallway here.
Yes, I would love to meet more founders while I'm here. So come and find me.
Thank you very much.